The wind didn't just blow that night, it attacked. Mary Bell felt it clawing at her coat like invisible hands trying to rip her away from this world. Snow fell in sharp, mean little darts, slicing sideways through the darkness. Behind her, the road had vanished, swallowed whole by white nothingness. Ahead, just blackness, and the howling prairie wind that sounded like something set loose from hell itself. She staggered forward, the baby heavy against her chest, wrapped in the last dry quilt she owned. Her other 5 children walked behind her like wounded pups following their mother. Caleb, barely 13, carried 2 sacks on his shoulders. Not one of them complained. They'd learned young. The world didn't care about their hunger or the freezing wind. The house was gone, not burned, just taken, foreclosed. That morning, a man in a heavy coat with a ledger wouldn't even look her in the eye. Said something about unpaid debts and no recourse. By nightfall, they were walking east toward a nowhere town she'd heard mentioned once in church. Maybe a depot, maybe a church, maybe someone who wouldn't look through them like glass. But what Mary didn't know was that this night would change everything, and the man she was about to meet would either save them or destroy them completely. Her legs ached, her skirts were stiff with ice at the hem. Every few minutes she turned to count the children, mouthing their names like a prayer she didn't believe in anymore. Caleb, Ruth, Henry, Josie, Louisa, baby John, 6 of them. All she had left in this world, and no promise she'd keep even that much. The land stretched wide and cruel, the moon hidden behind storm clouds. Her boots were worn thin at the soles. Snow had crept in hours ago. Her toes had gone numb, but she didn't care. Let them freeze. Let her drop. If not for the weight of the child on her chest, she might have done it already. A wagon had passed them earlier that day, headed the other direction. The driver didn't stop, just glanced at them once and tugged the reins to steer clear. She hadn't expected help. She wouldn't have asked for it anyway. Pity was a cold thing. Pride was colder. But even that had started to melt inside her, and what was left now was only forward. Then something happened that would haunt her for weeks, something she couldn't explain. They crested a hill, barely a rise, but it felt like climbing a mountain. She stopped, chest heaving, lungs burning with frozen air. The baby whimpered, a thin, raw sound that cut through her soul. Her breast was dry, no milk for him, no food for any of them since yesterday's crusts. Her hands shook as she adjusted the quilt, fingers so stiff they barely worked. Through the blur of snow, she saw it, a shape, a horse, a rider. She blinked hard, not trusting her eyes. Could be a fence post, could be a trick of exhaustion. But no, it moved. The horse's breath steamed white in the darkness. The man on top wore a wide-brimmed hat, dusted in frost. He sat perfectly still, watching them. Not riding past, not turning away, just watching. Caleb stepped up beside her, his voice barely a whisper. "Ma!" She couldn't answer, couldn't speak. The rider nudged the horse forward, slow and careful, as if not to spook them. As if they were deer in the open. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried through the wind. "You folks lost?" Mary straightened, her knees buckling before she caught herself. "We're not lost," she said, though her voice cracked like breaking ice. "We're walking." He looked past her at the children, at the baby, then back at her face. "Where to?" "East." It sounded foolish now, even to her. "We'll find a place." He dismounted, tall and lean, his boots crunching in the snow. He walked closer, holding the reins, eyes shadowed beneath his hat, jaw rough with stubble. He stopped a few paces away. "You got anywhere to go tonight?" She shook her head. Pride tried to rise up, tried to say something bitter, but it was too tired. So was she. He looked them over again, slower this time. A flicker of something crossed his face, something Mary couldn't read. He stepped back, turned the horse, then said it quiet and certain. "Follow me." She didn't move. Couldn't. Caleb's cold hand found hers. Ruth coughed behind them, a wet, dangerous sound. The man looked over his shoulder. "You can walk, or you can freeze. I ain't going to leave you." Something in the way he said it, like he wasn't asking, just stating a truth, broke through the last of her stubbornness. She nodded once, unable to speak. But what Mary didn't know was that this stranger had secrets of his own, secrets that could tear them all apart. They followed him through the deepening snow. The storm worsened, wind screaming across the open prairie. They walked in silence, broken only by the crunch of boots and the shivering breaths of children. The man rode ahead for a while, then doubled back, leading his horse beside them, slowing his pace to match theirs. He said little. She liked that. Words felt too heavy now. The baby slept, too cold to cry anymore. Mary tried not to think about what that meant. Her arms burned from holding him, but she didn't dare let go. After what felt like hours, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, a shape emerged through the dark. A squat house with smoke curling from its chimney. Low wood fencing. A lantern swinging by the porch, its light bouncing weakly in the wind. The man dismounted again, opened the gate with a creak, and gestured them inside. "You can rest here." Still, she hesitated. The world had never offered anything without a price. But her children were stumbling now, half asleep on their feet. Louisa had started to whimper, her hands bright red from the cold. Ruth was wheezing again, and the baby's breath was growing shallow. Mary stepped through the gate. The porch groaned under their weight. He opened the door, and warmth hit them like a physical blow. Thick wood smoke. Heat. She didn't realize how cold she'd become until her legs gave out and she collapsed against the doorway, still clutching the baby. Caleb caught her by the shoulder, helped her inside. The cabin was rough but solid. A fire roared in the hearth. A kettle hissed gently. Quilts were piled on a low bed, a long bench against the wall, and a cast-iron stove sat ready for cooking. The man took the baby from her arms without a word, unwrapping him and checking his color with practiced hands. Then he passed the infant to Ruth and began piling more logs into the fire. Mary tried to stand. Failed. Her vision spun. "Sit," he said. "You'll fall if you don't." So she did. He brought water, not warm, but not freezing either. The children drank like they'd been dying for it. Then he brought bread, dry but soft enough to chew. Henry cried as he ate, the sound low and confused, like he'd forgotten what food tasted like. Mary forced herself to stay upright. A mother can't break, no matter how far she's fallen. "You got names?" the man asked finally. She nodded, though it took effort. "Mary Bell, these are my children." He looked at them, counted quietly under his breath. 6. Yes. I'm Everett Cade. He didn't extend a hand, just offered the name like it was all he had. "You can stay tonight, maybe longer if you need." "Why?" It slipped out before she could stop it. He didn't flinch, just looked at the fire a moment, then said, "Because somebody should have helped sooner." And that's when Mary realized this man was running from something too. She watched him then, really watched him. The way he moved, nothing wasted, not young, but not old. His clothes were worn, patched at the elbows. His face was sun-creased, not cruel. Something behind his eyes looked familiar, like he too had knelt in the dirt at some point and heard nothing answer back. Later, after the children were laid out on quilts and the baby nursed again, weak but alive, she sat by the fire. Everett handed her a cup of tea, bitter and strong. "You come from west?" he asked. She nodded. "Homestead near Dry Fork. My husband passed in spring." He didn't ask how. He didn't have to. Men died easy out here. Illness, accidents, a bad horse, a bad debt. What mattered was she'd been left alone. He stirred the fire with a poker, then set it down. "I ain't got much," he said, "but what's here is yours for now." Mary looked at him, searching for the catch. There was none. Just a man with calloused hands and a quiet voice offering her a night without fear. The wind howled outside, but the fire held steady. She watched the shadows dance along the log walls and let herself believe, just for that night, that they might survive. But survival was just the beginning. What came next would test everything she thought she knew about trust. In the pale gray of early morning, Mary woke with a start, unsure where she was. The smell of wood smoke clung to her hair. Around her, the children still slept in a tangle of limbs and blankets, their breaths soft and even. A kettle hissed from the stove, and Everett stood at the table, slicing bread with a steady hand. It had snowed heavier in the night. Through the small window, the world was white, hushed and still. No roads, no tracks. Just the edge of the forest and the slow drifting of flakes. He noticed her watching. "There's more stew if you're hungry," he said without turning. "I can show your boy how to tend the goats after." She sat up stiffly, every joint aching. But it felt different now. Not the ache of collapse, the ache of someone still here. That first day, they hardly spoke. Caleb helped Everett carry water from the creek and chopped kindling with a small axe Everett loaned him. Ruth and Josie swept the floors and folded quilts. Louisa peeled potatoes with slow, clumsy hands. Henry fed the fire. Mary cleaned what she could, dishes, shelves, the wood stove, and watched the children ease into the quiet rhythm of work. That evening, Everett brought out a battered harmonica. He didn't ask permission, just sat on the porch, elbows on knees, and played slow, mournful tunes into the dusk. The sound drifted inside and curled around the room like smoke. It was the first time Mary had seen the children smile since their father died. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Everett was waiting for something, or running from it. The next morning, he handed her a pair of boots. "They'll be big," he said, "but better than what you got." She stared at them, leather cracked, laces frayed, but whole and dry. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, just looked past her at the window where the snow had softened into sunlit fog. "Lost my brother last year. He had a little girl. They didn't make it. Too far from help. I was late." She held the boots in her hands, suddenly unsure what to say. "I've been fixing this place up since," he continued. "Didn't figure it mattered to anyone but me." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Now I reckon maybe it does." That evening she made biscuits. The flour was old and the lard too little, but the smell filled the cabin. The children gathered near the stove, talking low, bellies full. Everett sat at the table, tired, but watching them with quiet satisfaction. After the dishes were washed and put away, Mary stepped outside. The wind had died, and the moon hung low, heavy with frost. Snow glittered across the yard like broken glass. She heard the door open behind her. Everett joined her, arms folded. "Never thought I'd see the prairie look beautiful again," she said. "It's always beautiful," he replied. "Just don't always feel like it." She nodded. He stood beside her a long while, not speaking, not pressing. And when she turned to go in, he stayed out, watching the sky. What Mary didn't know was that someone was watching them, someone who would soon arrive with news that would shatter everything. The days rolled on, a week, then another. Snow kept them in, but they didn't mind. Everett taught the boys how to mend fencing. Mary sewed patches onto clothes by firelight. Josie started drawing in the ash with sticks. Ruth sang to the baby when he cried, her voice thin but sure. Every so often, Mary would catch Everett watching the children with something almost like wonder, as if he couldn't believe they were real. One night when the wind returned, stronger this time, Mary found him outside nailing a loose shutter back into place. "You should let Caleb do that," she said, holding her shawl tight. He shrugged. "He will, but not in this wind." "You're kind," she said quietly. "That's not common out here." He didn't answer, just nodded toward the house. "You should go in. It's too cold for talk." But it wasn't. Not really. She stayed. Then came the knock that changed everything, a knock that would force Mary to choose between safety and freedom. Spring came slow. The snow didn't vanish. It retreated inch by inch, turning first to gray slush, then to thick, sucking mud. The land woke in fits and starts. Birds returned, tentative and quick. Buds pushed through brittle branches, and the days grew longer, though the nights still carried a bite. Mary took to walking the edge of the fields before breakfast. Not far, just enough to breathe. She liked the feel of the thaw beneath her boots, the damp earth giving way. Life was creeping back into the ground, into her bones. She hadn't expected that. Everett had cleared a space behind the cabin, marked out rows in the soil, handed her a sack of seed with a nod. Not much, but enough to start. She remembered planting with her husband in those first years of marriage, back when there was laughter and the future seemed like something you could shape with your hands. Her fingers had gone soft since then, but they remembered the work. She dug into the dirt like a woman starving, because she was starving for something she could claim. Everett worked beside her most mornings, sleeves rolled, face shadowed beneath his hat. He didn't hover, didn't instruct, just worked. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes not. It didn't matter. The silence had changed. One afternoon, she caught him watching Louisa chase chickens around the yard, her braids flying. He was smiling, just faint, almost hidden, but it was there. "You miss having family of your own?" she asked without thinking. He didn't flinch. "Had a little brother. Like I said, no wife, no time." He glanced toward the hills. "Folks I rode with, we weren't the settling kind." She waited. "I was meaner than I am now," he said finally. "Mean and proud of it. Ran hard, broke things, thought I was free. Then my brother wrote, said he needed help. So I came." His voice dropped. "Too late." Mary didn't reach for him, just let the words settle between them. "You changed," she said. He nodded. "Too late for some, not for others." They didn't talk about it again, but something shifted after that. The space between them grew smaller. The work they did, hauling water, mending fence, cooking over the fire, became a rhythm. The children stopped asking if they were leaving. But then the preacher came, and everything Mary had built began to crumble. A man on a mule arrived one morning, slick with travel and piety. He had pamphlets in his bag and judgment in his eyes. Said he was making rounds through the homesteads, spreading the word, checking on the lost sheep. He saw Mary, saw Everett, and frowned. "You two married." The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Everett stood behind the fence, hammer in hand. "No," he said. The preacher looked to Mary. "Then I reckon you ought to move on, miss. It ain't proper." Mary straightened. "We've got nowhere else." "There's always somewhere if you're willing to walk right." Everett stepped forward, slow. "She's raising 6 kids with no help, no handouts, and no husband. If that don't count as righteous, I don't know what does." The preacher sniffed. "I'll pray for your discernment." Don't waste your prayers, Everett said, voice flat. She's earned her place here. The man didn't stay the night. Afterward, they sat on the porch, the sun dipping low. Mary rubbed her hands, trying to calm the heat in them. You didn't have to speak for me, she said. Didn't do it for you. Did it for him. She turned, studied his face. He didn't look back. Folks don't like what they can't name, he said, and they can't name us. You think it matters? Used to. He looked down. Don't now. The baby cried inside. She started to rise, but he stopped her with a hand on her arm. Gentle, firm. You've done enough, he said. She didn't pull away. The wind shifted. Birds rustled in the trees. A hush settled between them, warm and full. Something unnamed, something true. And that's when Mary realized she was falling for him. But falling could mean freedom, or falling could mean disaster. Summer cracked the sky open with light. The fields burst green, thick with growth. Rain came in brief, hard spells, then vanished, leaving steam curling from the earth. The days stretched long and full, heavy with work. The children grew brown under the sun, leaner and stronger. Even little Louisa, who'd once wept from cold, now ran barefoot with a stick in one hand and a story in the other. Mary found herself laughing again. Not loud, not often, but real. Some nights after supper, they sat out beneath the stars. Everett would light his pipe and listen to Caleb describe his plans for the shed he wanted to build. Ruth mended clothes in the corner, humming to herself. Henry practiced tying knots. Mary sat with the baby in her lap and let the hush of the prairie settle into her chest. There were still hard days. Nights when the memories came back sharp and hot. Her husband's slow, wheezing breath in the last days, the way the banker never looked her in the eye, the long road east with 6 mouths to feed and nothing in her hands. But they didn't drown her like before. They passed like weather. One afternoon, Everett asked Caleb to ride into town with him. They were gone half the day. When they returned, Everett handed her a parcel wrapped in brown paper. Inside was fabric, sturdy calico, blue as twilight. For a dress, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I thought, maybe, if you wanted something that's yours. Mary stared at the cloth, her throat tightening. It had been years since anyone gave her anything just because. Not out of need or pity. Just want. I can't repay this, she said. Didn't ask you to. Then quieter. I like seeing you happy. That night she cut the pattern by lantern light, hands trembling. She hadn't sewn something new for herself in near a decade. Ruth helped her stitch it over the next days. When it was done, she tried it on and stepped outside into the gold of evening. Everett looked up from the porch, froze mid-whittle. He didn't say anything for a long while, just looked at her like he hadn't before. Then softly, "You look like the future." She wanted to believe him, but futures had a way of shifting, and 3 weeks later, the letter arrived that would force Mary to make an impossible choice. It came carried by a boy on a donkey, dust in his hair, the ink still wet, sealed with the mark of a county office. Mary took it with both hands, heart already sinking. A land dispute. Her husband's family, distant cousins from Missouri, had filed for rights to the old homestead. They wanted the land, said it was rightfully theirs, said she was squatting. The wording was clean, polite, legal, and final. Everett stood in the doorway, reading it beside her, his jaw clenched. You don't have to go, he said. They'll come with papers. Let them. She shook her head. It'll be more than paper. Men with rifles. A judge, maybe. I can't fight that. He turned away, pacing. I can't let you fight it for me, she added. You've done enough. He faced her, voice tight. "You're not a burden." "No," she said. "I'm a woman with 6 children and no deed. That's the truth of it." He stepped close then, closer than he ever had. "Then let's make a truth they can't touch." She looked up. "What do you mean?" His voice cracked a little when he said it. "Marry me." Her breath caught. "Not because you have to," he went on. "Because I want to. I want you here, all of you, not just in passing. For good." The wind rustled the wheat behind them, soft as breath. "You sure?" she asked. "I've never been sure of anything." She didn't speak, just laid her hand against his chest, felt the thump of his heart beneath her palm, steady as the land. And in that moment, Mary Bell made the choice that would either save them all or doom them forever. They married 2 weeks later under the cottonwood tree near the creek. No guests, no preacher, just the children, the wind, and the wide sky bearing witness. Ruth held the baby, his little fist wrapped around her braid. Caleb stood beside Everett, proud and stiff-backed, trying not to cry. Mary wore the blue dress. Everett wore his best shirt, the one with the patched cuff she had mended in secret. They spoke no vows. They didn't need to. Everett took her hands and looked her in the eye. Not smiling, not solemn, just steady. "You're here. I'm here. That's enough." Mary nodded. "Then we're married." The world didn't change. The earth didn't shift. But something in her chest opened. Not loud, not sharp, just a slow warmth spreading through the coldest corners. The children clapped. Henry shouted, "Can we eat now?" And Everett laughed for the first time in days. Afterward, they ate bread and beans on a blanket in the field. The baby slept against Mary's chest. Josie picked wildflowers and stuck them in Louisa's braids. Caleb helped Everett fix the gate before sundown. Nothing extravagant, nothing borrowed. But it was theirs. The letter hadn't vanished. The cousins were still out there, ink still drying, lawyers still scheming. But Everett had sent his own reply, quick and curt. "The land is ours now. Name's changed. Come see for yourself." And when no one came, the silence felt like victory. But victory never lasts long on the prairie, and the real test was about to begin. Work returned. The fields needed tending. The goats needed wrangling. Summer grew heavy, the air thick with dust and flies. Mary's days filled with sewing, cooking, hauling water, wiping noses. But it felt different now, not survival. Living. Everett came in late one evening, shirt dark with sweat, a shallow cut across his brow. She stepped close, touching the blood gently. "Fence post." "Fence post," he confirmed. "Mean one." She wet a cloth and pressed it to the cut. He winced. "You're awful gentle for someone who used to scare me half to death." "Scare you," he smiled. "First night you came here, looked like you might bury me with your bare hands if I so much as looked sideways." Mary smirked. "I still might." He caught her hand, turned it over, kissed the palm. "I'd die smiling." She pulled her hand away, but not fast. Later they sat on the porch. The children were asleep. The stars blinked wide above the horizon. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I'd be here," she said. "Where'd you think you'd be?" "Dead, or invisible, somewhere no one would look twice." He took her hand again, thumb brushing her knuckles. "I look at you every day," he said. She closed her eyes. Let the silence stretch. Let the wind move through the wheat, and the warmth of his shoulder hold her up. Inside, the baby stirred, but didn't cry. The house stood solid against the night, light flickering behind the shutters. Tomorrow there'd be more work. Chickens to chase, rows to weed, maybe a letter, maybe not. But tonight she had what she needed. a name, a home, a man who stayed. Then August brought something that would test whether love was enough to survive. Heat came like a hammer. The creek shrank to a trickle. The corn yellowed early. Dust clung to everything, thick in the lungs, under the nails. Flies moved in slow clouds around the barn, and even the chickens went quiet in the afternoons. The land, so generous just weeks before, turned stingy again. But they were used to want by now. Mary rationed flour and soaked beans by the firelight, teaching the girls how to stretch what little they had. Everett mended tools in the shed, stripped to the waist, arms browned and scarred. Caleb worked beside him with a boy's silent pride. The baby grew heavier on her hip, sharp-eyed and always hungry. Then came the rider. Late one morning, Mary saw the figure long before the horse crested the ridge. Dark hat, dark coat, cutting straight through the haze. A wrongness in the way he sat the saddle, like someone used to giving orders and not hearing no for an answer. Everett stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands with a rag. He saw her face before he saw the rider. "Stay inside," he said. "Everett, get the children in. Now." She didn't argue. The tone in his voice left no room. Inside, she gathered them quick, drew the girls to the back room. Caleb stayed at the window. She let him. The rider stopped at the gate but didn't dismount. He pulled out a folded letter from his coat and held it up like a weapon. "I'm looking for a Mary Bell," he called. Everett stood by the fence, arms crossed. "She's not here." The man smiled. Sharp. "Don't lie for her. I've got a name, a signature, and a legal claim. The land at Dry Fork is under dispute. Her presence here complicates things." "This is my land," Everett said. "And my wife's." "That won't hold in court." "Then take it to court." The man's smile faded. "You got 6 children here, Mr. Cade. You really want them to be part of this?" Everett stepped closer to the gate. "You threatening them?" The man leaned forward, voice low and oily. "I'm saying it'd be best for all parties if she came quiet, settled things clean." Inside, Mary's hands clenched. Her jaw ached from holding her mouth shut. She watched through the crack in the door, her heart pounding. Then Everett said, without flinching, "You got 1 minute to ride off, or I'll show you what clean looks like." The man hesitated. He was used to fear, used to backing folks into corners with words and letters and polished boots. But Everett Cade wasn't cornered. He stood easy, but ready. After a long beat, the man tucked the letter back into his coat, turned the horse, and rode off slow. Mary let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. But she knew, deep down, that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night, after the children were asleep, she found Everett sitting on the porch, rifle leaning against the rail. "You knew he'd come." He nodded. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to scare you." "I've been scared every day since I buried James," she said. "But today, I felt safe." Everett looked at her, eyes tired, voice rough. "He'll come back. Maybe not him, but someone. They won't stop. Then we won't either." He reached out, brushed her cheek with the back of his hand. "I can't promise you peace," he said. She took his hand, pressed it to her heart. "No," she said, "but you've already given me something better." "What's that?" "A reason to fight." The stars stretched overhead, quiet and endless. The wind moved through the fields like a hymn. Inside, the children stirred in sleep, safe for now. Outside, Mary Cade stood watch beside her husband, and the land no longer felt borrowed. But the biggest battle was still to come, one that would determine whether they kept everything or lost it all. September rolled in with a sky so wide it made a woman feel small just looking at it. The wheat swayed like a sea in the wind, gold and brittle, ready for harvest. The threat of drought still lingered, but the worst of the heat had passed, and with it a quiet settled over the land. Mary rose early now, before the sun crested the hills. She moved through the house barefoot, the baby on one hip, her steps so practiced they barely stirred the floorboards. The smell of wood smoke and coffee filled the kitchen. Everett would already be outside by then, feeding the goats, checking the fence line, watching the ridge for riders. No one else had come. Not yet. But the silence wasn't trust. It was waiting. They harvested together, the whole family. Caleb swung the scythe, tall and proud beside Everett. Ruth tied bundles. Josie chased crows from the edge of the fields. Mary moved through the rows with a rhythm she didn't remember learning, hands rough and sure, skirts dragging through the dust. There was peace in the work, peace in sweat and sunburn, peace in watching her children build something that might last. One evening, while the fire popped and the kettle hissed, Everett took a folded paper from his coat pocket and slid it across the table. "What's this?" she asked. "Claim form, signed, witnessed, and recorded in town. Your name's on it now. The land's ours. No contest." She stared at the ink, at the rough edge where the paper had been torn from a ledger. "But how?" "Judge owed me a favor," he said. "I cashed it in." She set the paper down slowly. "You didn't ask me." "No," he said. "I didn't." Anger sparked, then fizzled. There was no pride in her voice when she said it, just quiet disbelief. "You did all this for me." Everett leaned forward, elbows on the table. "No, I did it for us, for this house, these kids, for what we've built. You kept it alive, Mary. You walked through hell to hold on to it. I just hammered in a few nails." Her hands shook as she reached across the table and covered his. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. That night they lay in bed without speaking. The baby breathed soft between them. The walls creaked with the night wind. Mary stared at the ceiling, heart full and aching, realizing something she hadn't dared to feel in years. She wasn't afraid anymore. But fear has a way of finding you, even when you think you've left it behind. The final test came in late autumn. A cart rumbled down the road. This time, not a stranger. The cousins. Two of them. City men in stiff coats, fine boots, clean collars. They wore smugness like armor, their hands too soft to belong on this land. They asked to speak to Everett. He didn't answer. Mary stepped forward instead. "You're trespassing," she said. Flat. One of them smiled. "We're family." "No, you're opportunists." "We don't want trouble, Mrs. Cade. Just a fair deal." She folded her arms. "You had your chance. You chose a letter over blood." The younger one stepped down from the cart. "That land was our birthright." Mary moved closer. "Then you should have come when James fell sick, when the barn caved in, when we buried him and had nothing but dry bread and cold nights." The man said nothing. She took one more step. "It's not your land anymore, and if you try to take it, you'll answer to the county and to me." Everett stood behind her now, silent, unmoving. The cousins looked at the two of them, worn, rough, unbending, and knew the land would never be theirs. They left without another word. Afterward, Mary stood in the field alone, wind tugging at her shawl, the weight of every season behind her. She looked toward the hills, toward the path they'd taken on foot nearly a year before. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed. A full, deep breath. The kind you take when you're no longer running. Inside, the baby laughed. Caleb called out. The house was full of noise, of heat, of life. And the land was theirs. Mary Bell had walked through hell with 6 children and nothing but hope. She'd found a man who didn't just save her. He stood beside her. Together they built something the world said was impossible: a family, a home, a future. If you enjoyed this story of survival, love, and second chances, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear that no matter how dark the road gets, there's always light ahead. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Mary's shoes? And remember, the strongest chains aren't made of iron. They're made of people who refuse to let go.